Welcome back to Epic Mind History. In our last video, we left off with Wing Chun taking root in the city of Foshan through masters like Leung Jan and his student Chanhua Shun. The art was no longer just a secret for rebels. It was now a respected, though still very private, family treasure passed down carefully from teacher to student. As the 1800s turned into the 1900s, China was going through massive changes. The old Qing dynasty, which had been in power for centuries, finally collapsed in 1912. This ended thousands of years of imperial rule and opened up a completely new and uncertain chapter for the country. The world was modernizing, and traditional ways were being challenged. It was during this pivotal time of transition that a boy was born in 1893 who would eventually change the destiny of Wing Chun forever. His name was Ip Kai Man, though today the world knows him simply as Ip Man. Now, to understand Ip Man's story, we need to start in Foshan, where he grew up. He came from a very wealthy and well-known family. They owned a large estate with beautiful traditional houses and plenty of productive land. This family wealth is actually a crucial part of the story because it meant young Ip Man didn't need to work for a living like most people. His family's money gave him the freedom and time to really dive deep into his interests, and his biggest passion, from a very young age, was martial arts. People who knew him described him as a smart and serious boy, and he became absolutely determined to learn Wing Chun specifically. So he started asking the old master, Chanhua Shun, the one everyone called Money Changer Hua because of his profession, to take him on as a formal student. Now, Chanhua Shun was a big, tough man with a well-earned reputation for being very strict. He wasn't sure about teaching this privileged boy from a rich family. He worried that Ip Man might be spoiled, that he might not have the discipline or the physical toughness needed for the rigorous and often painful training that Wing Chun required. The story that has been passed down tells us that Ip Man was so incredibly eager to learn that he would stand outside the school for hours, watching the classes through the windows or any crack he could find. He would carefully memorize the movements and sequences, and then he would go home to his family's courtyard and practice them by himself over and over. He did this for a long time, just watching and learning from a distance, showing amazing dedication for someone so young. His persistence finally paid off during what became a legendary moment in Wing Chun folklore. One day, he saw one of the senior students practicing a form and repeatedly making the same mistake. Ip Man, who was still just a boy watching from outside, could not contain himself and politely pointed out the error. Chanhua Shun witnessed this and was truly astonished. He realized this boy hadn't just been mindlessly watching, he had been actively understanding and analyzing the techniques. He saw Ip Man's natural talent and his deep, genuine desire to learn the art. Right then and there, he decided to accept Ip Man as his formal, closed-door student. Ip Man was only 13 years old at the time, and he became Chanhua Shun's final student, the last one the old master would ever accept. For the next 4 years, Ip Man immersed himself completely in learning the entire Wing Chun system from his master. He trained with an intensity that impressed even the older students and proved to be a brilliant and dedicated pupil. He lived and breathed the art, spending countless hours on the wooden dummy, practicing his forms and developing his skills. Then, tragically, Chanhua Shun passed away when Ip Man was just 16 years old. But before he died, the master made a special request of his senior student, a man named Jung Sak. He asked to continue guiding the young Ip Man and to ensure his training did not stop. This deathbed wish shows how much Chanhua Shun believed in Ip Man's extraordinary potential. He knew this young man was special and that he could one day do great things for their art. A few years after his master's death, when Ip Man was in his teenage years, his family sent him to Hong Kong to attend St. Stephen's College, a more modern school that would give him a contemporary education. This move, which probably seemed like a normal step for a rich family at the time, would turn out to be one of the most important events in his life and in the entire history of Wing Chun. While he was living and studying in Hong Kong, a fellow classmate told him about an older man who was also a Wing Chun practitioner. This friend thought the two should meet, perhaps for a friendly exchange of ideas. The man was much older, and when Ip Man confidently showed him his skills, something completely shocking happened. The older man effortlessly blocked, deflected, and controlled every single one of Ip Man's attacks. Ip Man, who had been so confident in his abilities after being the top student in Foshan, could not lay a finger on him. he was completely and totally overwhelmed, his techniques rendered useless. This was a monumental shock and a deeply humiliating experience for the young man who had been considered a prodigy back home. It was a powerful lesson that showed him there were still entire worlds of knowledge he had not yet encountered. The older man then introduced himself as Leung Bik, and here's the crucial part that changed everything. Leung Bik was the son of the legendary Leung Jan, the very same king of Wing Chun who had been Chan Ma Shun's own teacher. So Ip Man had learned from the senior student, but now he was meeting the master's own son, who had learned a deeply refined and perhaps more complete version of the art directly from the source, his father. All right, everyone, we're at the halfway point of this incredible story. If you're enjoying learning about the real history of Wing Chun and Ip Man's journey, please do us a huge favor and subscribe to the Epic Mind History channel. Your support helps us keep creating these detailed documentaries for you. And now, let's get back to the story. Ip Man, being wise beyond his years, didn't let his wounded pride get in the way. He immediately and humbly asked Leung Bik to become his teacher. He understood that this was a unique and precious opportunity to learn from the direct, pure lineage. For the next several years, he continued his Wing Chun education under Leung Bik's patient guidance. This period was like a postgraduate degree in Wing Chun. It filled in many subtle gaps in his knowledge and gave him a much deeper, more sophisticated understanding of the art's underlying theory and principles. It transformed him from a very good technical fighter into a true master and a profound thinker about the art's very essence. After finishing his studies with Leung Bik, Ip Man returned to Foshan in his early 20s. He was now a complete and profoundly skilled master of Wing Chun, but he still did not open a public school. That tradition of private teaching remained strong. Instead, he lived a comfortable life on his family's wealth. He worked for a time as a police officer and taught Wing Chun only in private to a small select group of close friends, family, and a few trusted associates. He was well known and deeply respected in Foshan's martial arts circles as a man of incredible skill, but he was not a public teacher. He was what you might call a gentleman practitioner, keeping the art alive within a small community. This relatively quiet life continued for many years through the turbulent 1930s and 1940s, a period when China was invaded by Japan and suffered through the terrible hardships of World War and Civil War. Then, in 1949, a major political revolution swept across China. The new communist government had very different ideas about society, and for someone like Ip Man, who came from a wealthy landowning family and had previously worked as a police officer, it became very difficult and increasingly dangerous to remain. He faced an impossible choice. He made the heart-wrenching decision to leave his ancestral home, his property, and most of his family behind. He crossed the border alone into the British colony of Hong Kong. He was 55 years old, arriving with little more than the clothes on his back, a man forced to start his life completely over with almost nothing. This was undoubtedly a low point in his life, a time of great personal loss, but it was also the pivotal event that would force Wing Chun out of its private shell and onto the world stage. Sometimes, history shows us that the biggest blessings and changes come from the most difficult and painful circumstances. In Hong Kong, Ip Man struggled at first. He was lonely, homesick, and he urgently needed to find a way to make a living. A friend who knew about his incredible skills finally convinced him to start teaching Wing Chun to the public to earn a basic income. This was a monumental, culture-shifting decision. For its entire history, spanning nearly 200 years, Wing Chun had been a secret art, taught only to a carefully selected few. Now, out of sheer necessity, Ip Man was going to break with tradition and teach it to anyone who could pay the small monthly fee. He rented a modest, simple space on the rooftop of a building that housed the Restaurant Workers Union and hung up his sign. His first students were waiters, cooks, and other blue-collar workers. They were not martial arts purists or aristocrats. They were regular, hard-working people who wanted to learn how to defend themselves on the tough streets of Hong Kong. And so, on a simple, sun-beaten rooftop in the crowded city, the modern era of Wing Chun was born. Ip Man's teaching style was unique and revolutionary in its own way. He was not a loud, aggressive, or intimidating man.
So, during Ip Man's teaching of students, he was calm, intellectual, and incredibly precise. He would often sit quietly in a chair, smoking a cigarette while watching his students practice, and then he would calmly get up and make a small, specific, and insightful correction. He focused relentlessly on the concepts and ideas behind the movements, the body structure, the precise angles, the efficient use of energy. He explained things in a logical, almost scientific way that made complex martial concepts suddenly feel clear and accessible. His reputation as a professor of Kung Fu began to grow. People started to hear whispers about this quiet, incredibly skilled master teaching on a rooftop in Kowloon. His school began to attract more and more students from all walks of life, including a particularly energetic, confident, and ambitious young teenager who would eventually change the future of global martial arts forever. That young man was Bruce Lee. He was a teenager in Hong Kong, something of a troublemaker who was already getting into frequent street fights. His parents, worried about his future, wanted him to channel his explosive energy into something positive and disciplined, so they sent him to learn formal martial arts. Bruce Lee joined Ip Man's school around 1954. He was a fiercely dedicated and naturally gifted student. He trained hard in Wing Chun for several years, absorbing the core system that emphasized directness, efficiency, and practical reality over flashy technique. These Wing Chun principles became the absolute bedrock, the foundation for his entire personal approach to combat and philosophy. Even after he moved to the United States and began to develop his own system, which he called Jeet Kune Do, the profound influence of his years under Ip Man was always there, visible in his lightning-fast direct punches, his relentless forward pressure, and his sophisticated trapping techniques. The student may have eventually surpassed the teacher in international fame, but the teacher's art was the fundamental rock upon which Bruce Lee built everything. Bruce Lee's meteoric rise to international movie stardom in the late 1960s and early 1970s was like a lightning bolt across the global cultural landscape. He was an instant sensation, a global superstar. And because he was always proud and vocal about his martial arts roots, the whole world suddenly became aware of Wing Chun and of his primary teacher, Ip Man. This created a massive, unstoppable wave of interest. People from every corner of the planet suddenly wanted to learn the style that had trained Bruce Lee. This brought floods of new students directly to Ip Man's door and, just as importantly, to the doors of his own senior students who began to open their own schools across Hong Kong and soon the world. Ip Man continued to teach and inspire in Hong Kong until he passed away in 1972. He had successfully, and against all odds, transformed Wing Chun from a secretive family art in Foshan to a public legacy in Hong Kong, single-handedly setting the stage for it to spread across the globe. His students and their students would ensure that the art he dedicated his life to would be practiced in cities and towns on every continent, making Wing Chun one of the most recognized, respected, and practiced Chinese martial arts in the world today. Wait for part 3, where we will talk about the next chapter of Wing Chun's global spread, how Ip Man's senior students like William Chung, Wang Shun Lung, and Leung Sheng carried the art to new heights, and how Wing Chun continued to evolve after the passing of its most famous master. We'll explore the different branches of the Wing Chun family tree and how this ancient art continues to adapt in the modern world. Make sure you're subscribed to Epic Mind History so you don't miss the conclusion of this amazing story.